Growing up reading manga, I've seen many series. Some I'm proud to have finished or caught up with, while others I am deeply ashamed of. Gantz is in a strange spot for me, skillfully towing the line between the two. For those who don't know, Gantz was a manga that first began in the year 2000, written by Hiroya Oku, whose other big work is probably Inuyashiki, which you may have seen as that Android Grandpa series. Gantz would run for 13 years, spanning 37 volumes while targeting the seinen demographics, so a little older than the usual shonen. The premise was a little weird. The newly deceased are revived to participate in these hunter/hunted games, and there's a search to find out the reason and cause behind these events. Although it doesn't have the same accolades as some of its peers from the same era, it does have some level of public success, even spawning a few sequels which were average at best, and film adaptations that were also leaning more towards average than good. On the one hand, Gantz was a marvel of artistic techniques blending together to create a rather pretty piece of work. As the first series, at least in my mind, to have combined 3D models with traditional pen and paper drawing, Oku was able to produce works that could at the same time feel expansive and personal. We could see these fantastic panels with skyscrapers, flying machines, robots, aliens, and monsters all together while not losing too much on detail on any single element. Oku revealed that when he was creating chapters, he would prepare it almost like a film with thumbnails, and that by using a 3D model library of his characters, he can use that as the base of his work to give it that stylized feel. The characters themselves admittedly look a bit stiff at times, but this kind of methodology does wonders in large scale panels, as well as near the end of the series when it became second nature to Oku. The tone was, and I hate using this word here, but refreshing, especially in the context of its era. If you, like me, grew up in the 2000s, then Gantz was noticeably darker than its peers. It wasn't just the violence, which was considerably more graphic and at times needlessly graphic, but sexual overtones and a flexibility in killing off characters were both things that seemed out of place, and as a result let Gantz stand out. The anime tries to tone down Gantz, and as a result it loses some of that flair that keeps it relevant. The series is without a doubt gory and violent, yet something about it kept bringing you back for a little bit more, almost like a guilty pleasure. As far as the characters went, it's also a coin flip as to whether or not you'll like most of these. Our protagonist Kei starts out as a whiny little kid, transitions into a emo and dark teenager, and finally relaxes a little and reaches his peak as a character near the end of the series. It's weird following Kei while growing up side by side, as depending on what age range you fall into, different faces of the same character could or could not appeal to you. It was later revealed that to Oku, anyone other than Kei was expendable, and as such, it's yet another coin flip as to how well written the other characters are, depending on how much in advance Oku knew where he was going with them and deciding on whether or not to put time into them. As with most of my favorite series, there were fights, and admittedly, some of these were the most entertaining fights that we've ever seen. Large in scale, with a chance of actual harm coming to our characters, sold. There were some of my favorite takedowns, and some of the villains were some of the most creative that I've seen to date. When the action is turned up to 11 and the flow of the fight is properly thought out, Gantz has some of the most satisfying sequences of any kind. But as I've gone on and on about all these positives, everything should be hinting towards good, but why do I hesitate? For the most part, Gantz suffered from trying to branch out too wide, and as a result, many of these story branches ended up dying out way too quickly. If everything so far has not felt like spoilers to you, this is your last chance to get out. Izumi is an interesting example of this. While I can almost understand his motivations, he showed a disproportionate emotional state when trying to find his way back into the game of Gantz in comparison to his mood on his way out. I can even ignore the blatantly disgusting methodology he uses to return, but that felt like it was done purely for the sake of shock with no real consequences coming out of it. People died for his return. Kei even knows that Izumi is the gunner, yet he treats it like just another boys will be boys that kind of reaction later down the line. Sure, you might say that Kei never aided Izumi like he would the others, but really, you're going to let him walk freely after what he's done? Really? Kei also has so many branching storylines that go nowhere. Remember the vampires? There were vampires in this stupid story. Was it built upon the rush of vampire media that seemed to have come out in the 2000s? I don't know, but it sure as hell wasn't well thought out. One of the vampires even ended up being Kei's younger brother, who was seemingly perfect in every way. Okay, interesting. I can see potential routes that could be explored and decapitated. How about the other vampires, the two top vampires in Hikawa and his partner Chiaki? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. They get sucked into the Gantz games, being forced to kill other monsters or face death. Okay, cool premise. They even work a little bit with our group and finish a mission, and they're gone. What do I mean by they're gone? I just mean they're gone. They just never appear again, as though Oku decided that, you know what, vampires aren't cool anymore. And let's not forget the entire final arc. What is that aliens attack arc? What was the point of it? What does it create? What is a result? What is the result? Does it advance the story? Does it satisfy readers? The answer to all of those are negatory. The last arc felt like a last hurrah of, well, I know how to mix and match 3D models. Let me show off what I can do. Nothing more, nothing less. The most disappointing part about these weak parts of the writing, which are such a large part of the story, to be honest, is that we know that Oku can create some compelling stories within the story. Let's look at Kaze and how he would come to bond with Takeshi. Now that is a beautifully crafted story of two imperfect beings finding someone who they either never knew they needed or never thought they could have. This kind of dry, realistic, yet touching relationship building is what pulls this series back from what could have been a giant dumpster fire. Some of the other characters were pretty good, and if we accept that this world is bleak and not everyone deserves a happy ending, how things unravel can be easier to stomach. Kato, for example, has a closed and finite story with some small deviations and was overall enjoyable. The story of Hiroto is bitter but one suitable for this world, and honestly it felt like as long as Oku wasn't doing something on a whim, he could actually make some really compelling stories. Different people will complain about different things. Some may point out that the violence and the sex was at times there for the sake of being there, but I think that kind of point is mute if you go in knowing there will be violence and sex. The art, while good, also felt a little bit cookie cutter. There were glorious drawn parts, don't get me wrong, but at the same time those sometimes felt almost too perfect, and because of the art style that Oku decided on, there was a weird uncanny valley effect where they seem human-like but in an uncomfortable manner. At the end of the day, do I think Gantz was good? Hesitantly, yes. I hesitate because that would also mean that some of the story decisions that the author took were also as a result fall into good. In terms of success, we can't deny Gantz that, as it remains one of the higher earning series of all time, and at the very least has a decent cult following. The sequels and spin-offs are additional content for those who really enjoy this world but otherwise are more missed than hit. I think Gantz was a universe that had some pretty strong elements going for it. The premise was interesting from the offset, but it deviated and fell off a cliff in terms of writing somewhere down the line, and what could have been is just a has-been. Thank you all for watching this video of mine. I put in some effort to create some of the elements to help make the videos more visually appealing. I hope you'll continue supporting this channel through liking, commenting, and subscribing. This has been Yuan from Manga4Dummies, and see you next time, everybody.